The photograph shouldn't exist. Detective Avery Rios stared at the image on her computer screen, her coffee growing cold in her hand. August 17, 1982, timestamp 10:12 p.m. A teenage girl with honey blonde hair sat in the backseat of a sedan, her face pale against the darkness beyond the window, her lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Emily Pierce, dead at 10:03 p.m., according to every official record. Yet here she was, 9 minutes after her supposed death, very much alive, captured by a camera that had no reason to be there. The photo had arrived anonymously that morning, 40 years after the night Tampa's most haunting mystery began. No return address, no explanation. Just the image and a single sentence scrawled on the back. Some families bury more than their dead. Avery's hands trembled as she reached for her phone, but she stopped. 40 years. 4 decades of silence, sealed files, and a town that had moved on from the Pierce tragedy. Almost moved on. Because in Tampa, some stories never really die. They just wait in the humid darkness, patient as the swamps that border the city, ready to surface when you least expect them. Before we go deeper into what really happened that night, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because stories like this, real mysteries that challenge everything you think you know about, justice and truth, they need to be heard. The algorithm will only show you more of these deeply researched cold cases if you engage. Subscribe, comment where you're watching from, and share this with someone who loves true mysteries. These aren't just stories. They're pieces of forgotten lives, waiting for someone to care enough to listen. Now let me take you back to a night when the air tasted like copper and rain, when thunder rolled across Tampa Bay, and when a 14-year-old girl named Emily Pierce sat at her desk, writing words that would haunt investigators for generations. Tampa, Florida, August 17, 1982, 8:47 p.m. The Pierce house sat on Magnolia Drive like a postcard of American dreams. White columns, manicured lawn, the kind of neighborhood where people left their doors unlocked and children rode bikes until the streetlights flickered on. Emily's window glowed soft yellow in the gathering dusk. Inside, she bent over her diary, purple pen moving across the page in looping cursive. "Piano recital is in 3 days," she wrote. "I'm nervous but ready. Mom says I'll be perfect. Dad says Mr. Tom is coming for dinner tonight. I wish he wouldn't. When Mr. Tom comes, the air feels wrong. Like before a thunderstorm, when everything goes still, and you know something bad is coming." She paused, tapping the pen against her lower lip. From downstairs, she could hear her mother's voice, sharp and tense, a tone Marcia Pierce only used when Tom Garrison's name came up. Emily's father, Daniel, responded in low, measured tones that made the 14-year-old's stomach clench. They'd been fighting more lately. Not yelling exactly. Worse. The kind of fighting done in whispers behind closed doors, in the dark hours after Emily went to bed. She'd heard fragments, words like exposure and consequences, and protect the family. Emily closed her diary and placed it in her desk drawer, then walked to her window. Tom Garrison's silver sedan was pulling into the driveway. She watched him emerge, tall, lean, with the kind of easy smile that made people trust him instantly. He carried a bottle of wine and a manila envelope that seemed too thick for a casual dinner visit. The doorbell rang. Emily heard her father's footsteps heavy on the hardwood. The front door opened. Male voices, greeting each other with the backslapping familiarity of old friends. But Emily noticed what others might have missed. Her mother hadn't come downstairs. Marcia Pierce stood at the top of the stairs, hands gripping the banister, knuckles white, watching Tom Garrison enter her home with the expression of someone watching a snake slide under the door. By 9:30 p.m., Emily was supposed to be in bed. She wasn't. She sat on the top stair, hidden in shadow, listening to the conversation that drifted up from the dining room like smoke. "You can't be serious, Daniel." Tom's voice, no longer friendly. "You've been skimming from company accounts for 2 years. 2 years. I've got the proof right here." A pause. The clink of glass on glass, ice settling in whiskey. "It's not what you think. Her father's voice strained. Then what is it? Because the numbers don't lie. And if I found it, someone else will. The auditors won't find anything. A new voice, cold, controlled. Her mother speaking from somewhere Emily couldn't see. Because you're not going to tell them. Marcia, don't. No, Daniel, I'm done being quiet, done pretending. Tom, you walk out of here tonight and forget what you think you saw. Or Emily pays the price. The words hung in the air like a blade. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. What did that mean? What price? She stood, meaning to creep back to her room, but her foot caught the edge of the loose floorboard, the one that always creaked. The sound echoed down the stairs like a gunshot. Silence below. Complete, suffocating silence. Then footsteps, fast, climbing. Emily ran. She made it 3 steps before she saw her mother at the top of the stairs, eyes wild, face twisted into something Emily didn't recognize. You were supposed to be asleep, Marcia whispered. Behind her, Tom Garrison appeared, manila envelope clutched in his hand. Behind him, Daniel, face white as bone. Emily opened her mouth to say something, anything, but the words never came. Because in that moment, everything that would happen next was already in motion. The scream that would wake the neighbors. The 911 call that would come at 9:47 p.m. The discovery that would shatter a family and birth a legend. But the truth? The real truth about what happened in those final moments? That story has been buried for 40 years until now. The crime scene photographs told a story that made no sense. Detective Avery Rios spread them across her desk in the cold case unit. 40 years of dust and silence clinging to each image like a ghost refusing to leave. The Pierce house frozen and flashbulb white. Emily's body at the bottom of the stairs, one slipper on, one missing. Her neck bruised in a pattern that suggested hands, adult hands, had gripped her throat before she fell. Daniel Pierce on the floor beside his daughter, face buried in his palms, shoulders shaking. And the most haunting detail, a single handprint in blood on the wallpaper near the back door. Small, delicate, female. They'd assumed it was Emily's. For 40 years, everyone assumed it was Emily's blood. The DNA results sitting in front of Avery proved otherwise. That blood belonged to Marcia Pierce, the mother who claimed she'd been upstairs during the entire incident. The mother who'd never mentioned being injured. The mother who disappeared from Tampa within 11 months, leaving behind a forwarded address that led nowhere. But the photograph, that impossible photograph of Emily alive at 10:12 p.m. changed everything. Because if Emily survived the fall, even for minutes, then the official timeline was a carefully constructed lie. And someone had been there to document it. Avery picked up her phone and made a call she'd been avoiding for 3 days. The phone rang 4 times before a raspy voice answered. Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb, this is Detective Rios with Tampa PD. Cold case unit, I'm reopening the Emily Pierce investigation. Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. Marcus Webb had been the lead detective on the original case in 1982. Now, 78 and retired, he'd spent 4 decades insisting something about that night never added up. His obsession with the Pierce case had cost him his marriage, nearly his career. Other cops called him Pierce's ghost, a man haunted by the one case he couldn't solve. You found something, not a question, a statement. I need to know what you held back, Avery said. What didn't make it into the official reports? Another long pause. Meet me at the house. Magnolia Drive, 1 hour. And detective? Come alone. The line went dead. Avery grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. But her partner, Sam Ortega, blocked her path. Sam had been with Cold Case for 15 years, had seen every horror Tampa's past could offer, but even he looked unsettled when she'd shown him the photograph. You're not going alone to meet some retired cop with an obsession, Sam said. You know the statistics. Most cold case breakthroughs come with fresh bodies attached. Webb was a good detective. The file says he nearly got suspended for harassment during the investigation. Daniel Pierce filed 3 complaints against him. Marcus Webb believed that family was guilty of something and he wouldn't let it go. That kind of obsession? It's dangerous. But Avery was already moving past him, keys in hand. Because she understood Webb's obsession. She felt it growing in her chest with every piece of evidence that didn't fit. Every lie that unraveled when you pulled the thread. Some cases demanded resolution. They burrowed into your bones and refused to leave until justice, or at least truth, saw daylight. And if you're feeling that same pull, that need to know what happened, then don't scroll past this story. Subscribe right now. Share this with someone who understands that the worst crimes aren't always the ones that make headlines. Sometimes they're the ones that hide in plain sight for decades. Comment and let me know. Do you think the parents were protecting Emily, or were they protecting themselves? Because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about that night. The Pierce house looked smaller than in the photographs. 40 years of Florida humidity had aged it poorly. Paint peeling, shutters hanging crooked, lawn overgrown. A for sale sign had been stabbed into the earth so many times the post was splintered. No one wanted to live where Emily Pierce died, or where everyone thought she died. Marcus Webb's truck sat in the driveway, rusted and loud. He stood on the porch, a man carved from leather and regret, holding a cardboard box that sagged with age. "You're younger than I expected," he said by way of greeting. "You're exactly what I expected," Avery replied. Webb's mouth twitched, almost a smile. He gestured toward the door. "Still have the key. Family lawyer gave it to me years ago, said I might need it someday. Guess someday is today." Inside, the house smelled of mildew and something else. Memory, maybe. The kind of scent that clings to places where bad things happened. The staircase dominated the entryway, its banister still bearing the faint outline where fingerprint dust had been applied decades ago. Webb set the box on the dusty floor and pulled out a file. "This is what I couldn't prove. What they wouldn't let me follow." He handed Avery a bank statement dated August 1982, Daniel Pierce's personal account. 3 withdrawals in the week before Emily died, each for exactly $9,900, just under the federal reporting threshold. $27,000 in cash, Webb said. Gone. Daniel claimed it was for a business investment that fell through. But I checked. No investment, no business partner. The money vanished. You think he was paying someone? I think someone was paying him, or blackmailing him. Look at the deposits from the previous year. Avery flipped back. Regular deposits, always in odd amounts, always from a company called Garrison Holdings. Tom Garrison's company. Tom was paying Daniel under the table? Or Daniel was stealing from Tom and trying to cover his tracks? Either way, Tom figured it out. That's why he came to dinner that night. Not for friendship, for confrontation. Avery's mind raced. The manila envelope witnesses saw Tom carrying evidence, financial records, proof of whatever Daniel had been doing. I searched for that envelope for months, never found it. Just like I never found Tom Garrison. Webb walked to the back door, his footsteps echoing in the empty house. But here's what kept me awake for 40 years, Detective. That handprint. Marcia's blood. It was smeared, not dripped. Like she'd pressed her hand against the door trying to open it while someone held it shut. Avery felt her skin prickle. You think someone locked her in? I think someone tried to keep her from leaving. And I think that someone was Daniel Pierce. Webb turned, his eyes hard. But here's what I couldn't figure out. If Marcia was trapped, who let her out? And why did she lie about it for 40 years? The question hung between them like a noose. Avery pulled out her phone and showed Webb the photograph. Emily in the back seat, alive, smiling that strange, not quite smile. Webb's face went gray. His hand shook as he took the phone, brought it close to his face. Dear God, he whispered, she made it out. For 9 minutes at least. No. Webb's voice cracked. You don't understand. Look at the car interior. That's not Tom's sedan. The upholstery is wrong. Tom had leather seats. This is cloth. Cheaper. This is... He stopped. His finger traced something in the background of the photo, barely visible through the window behind Emily's head. A sign, weathered, familiar. Lake Mirror Marina, Webb read aloud. She wasn't just a live detective, she was running. Someone helped her escape, and they took her to the one place in Tampa where secrets go to drown. Lake Mirror had swallowed its secrets for 40 years. Avery stood at the water's edge 3 days after her meeting with Marcus Webb, watching the morning mist curl off the surface like smoke from a dying fire. The lake stretched dark and still, reflecting nothing but gray sky and the skeletal remains of the old marina, a structure that had been condemned in 1985, 3 years after Emily Pierce supposedly died. Coincidence, the official report said. Just an old building finally giving up its ghost. But Avery didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Webb stood beside her, holding a laminated map from 1982. His finger traced a route from the Pierce house to the marina, 12 minutes by car. Less if you were driving fast, running scared, desperate to disappear. I came here in '83, Webb said, his voice rough with memory. Interviewed the marina owner, old man named Chester Boyle. Asked if he'd seen anything unusual the night Emily died. He said no, but his hands shook when he said it. And his eyes, Webb paused. His eyes went straight to the water. Did you search the lake? Tried. Department said there was no probable cause. No evidence Emily had ever been here. The photograph didn't exist then, remember? All we had was a dead girl at the bottom of a staircase and a missing family friend everyone assumed had murdered her and run. Webb's jaw tightened. Chester Boyle died in 1987, drove his truck into this very lake. They called it an accident, but the man had been sober 15 years. And they found a note in his house, just 2 words, "Forgive me." Avery felt the pieces shifting, patterns emerging from chaos. She pulled out her phone and opened the photograph again, zooming in on details she'd missed before. Emily's expression, that strange, not quite smile. The way her hands gripped the seat, knuckles white. And in the corner of the frame, partially obscured by shadow, something else. A dark smudge on Emily's dress near her collarbone. Blood. Not much, just a small stain, easily missed. But it was there, marking her like a signature. Emily had been injured before this photograph was taken. Before 10:12 p.m. Before she supposedly died at the bottom of the Pierce staircase. Before we go further, I need you to understand something. Cases like this don't solve themselves. They need people who care enough to look deeper, to question the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about justice and closure. If this story matters to you, if you believe Emily Pierce deserves more than 40 years of silence, then subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell, because what we're about to uncover will shake everything you thought you knew about that night. And I need you here when it does. Comment below if you're ready for the truth, no matter how dark it gets. The sonar equipment arrived at noon, operated by a marine recovery team that specialized in underwater crime scene investigation. They'd found everything from murder weapons to entire vehicles in Florida's murky lakes. The team leader, a woman named Diana Chen, studied the 1982 map and the modern satellite imagery side by side. The lake's deeper than it looks, Diana said. Average depth 20 feet, but there are trenches that drop to 40, 50 feet. If someone wanted to hide something here, they'd have plenty of options. How long to search the whole lake? Avery asked. Whole lake? 3 weeks minimum. But if you can narrow down a search zone, the marina. Webb pointed to the northern section. Chester Boyle's office overlooked this area. If he saw something, it would have been here. Diana nodded and directed her team into the water. The sonar boat cut across the lake's surface, leaving ripples that spread and vanished like forgotten memories. Avery watched the monitors inside the equipment van, screens filled with shadowy underwater topography. Rocks, fallen trees, debris from decades of storms. Then at 2:47 p.m. the sonar pinged. Got something, Diana called out. 42 feet down northeast corner near the old dock pilings, large metallic object, definitely man-made. Avery's heart hammered. How large? Vehicle-sized. The dive team went down immediately, weighted lines guiding them into the murky depths. Avery stood at the water's edge, Webb beside her, both silent as graves. Minutes stretched like hours. Then the divers surfaced, and even through their masks, Avery could see the shock in their eyes. "Silver sedan," one diver reported, treading water. "License plate matches the registration for Thomas Garrison. And detective, there's someone inside." The recovery took 4 hours. Chains and winches, the careful work of pulling 40 years of murder from the deep. The sedan emerged from Lake Mirror like something born from nightmare. Rusted, covered in algae, windows still intact but fogged with decay. Water poured from every seam as the crane lifted it onto the shore. Tom Garrison's body was still behind the wheel, skeletal hands on the steering column, gold wristwatch still gleaming despite the water. Diana photographed everything before the forensic team moved in. The watch was engraved, "To Tom, for every success. DP." Daniel Pierce, the best friend, the business partner, the man who'd sat beside his dead daughter and wept for the cameras. But it was the skull that told the real story. Fractured from behind, a blow powerful enough to cave in the back of Tom's head. He'd been murdered before the car went into the water. Someone had killed him, staged his disappearance, and let Tampa believe he'd fled in guilt. Webb's voice cracked when he spoke. "Daniel. It had to be Daniel. They fought about the money and Daniel killed him." But Avery was looking at something else. The passenger seat was pushed back, reclined, as if someone had been lying down, hiding. And caught in the seat springs was a small piece of fabric, purple, aged to brown by water and time. The same color as Emily's dress in the photograph. "She was here," Avery whispered. "Emily was in this car." Diana Chen carefully extracted the fabric and sealed it in an evidence bag. "If she was, we'll know. DNA can survive underwater conditions if it's protected. This fabric was wedged deep in the springs. There's a chance—" "Run it," Avery interrupted. "Priority 1. I need to know if Emily Pierce was in this car, and if she was, I need to know when." Because the timeline made no sense. Emily supposedly died at 10:03 p.m. The photograph showed her alive at 10:12 p.m. And now they had evidence suggesting she'd been in Tom Garrison's car, the same car that was now at the bottom of Lake Mirror with Tom's murdered body inside. Which meant one of 3 possibilities. Emily had been in the car before Tom was killed. She'd been in the car when Tom was killed. Or she'd been in the car after Tom was killed, placed there by whoever had murdered him. Webb gripped the evidence bag containing Tom's watch, his weathered face etched with something between vindication and horror. "I was right. All those years, they said I was obsessed, paranoid. But I was right. Daniel Pierce was a murderer." "Maybe," Avery said slowly. "But if Daniel killed Tom and dumped the car, why would Emily be in it? Why would his daughter—" She stopped, because the answer was suddenly terribly clear. Emily wasn't killed at 10:03 p.m. She was taken, removed from the house while Daniel staged the scene. Someone drove her to this marina in Tom's car, took that photograph at 10:12 p.m., Then what? The divers were back in the water now, searching for more evidence. And 20 minutes later they found it. 30 feet from the car, partially buried in silt. A purple slipper, size 6, Emily's size. The missing slipper. And wrapped inside it, protected from the water by plastic, was a folded piece of paper. The missing diary page. Emily's handwriting, hurried and terrified. "Mom said if I tell, the family dies. She said Tom has to disappear. She said I have to disappear too. I'm scared. I don't want to go in the water. Please, someone find this. Please tell them what really—" The entry stopped mid-sentence, as if Emily had been interrupted, as if someone had taken the pen from her hand. Webb read it twice before he could speak. "Marcia. Dear God, it was Marcia all along. The woman who opened the door in Asheville, North Carolina, looked nothing like the photographs from 1982. Marcia Pierce, now Marcia Coleman, was 72 years old, her hair silver instead of auburn, her face carved with lines that spoke of sleepless decades. But her eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, the kind of eyes that had watched her daughter die and walked away to build a new life. Avery had driven 12 hours straight after the diary page was recovered. She'd left Webb behind in Tampa, left the forensic teams processing the scene, left Sam Ortega shouting warnings about jurisdiction and proper procedure. Because some things couldn't wait for warrants and official channels. Some truths had been buried too long. Mrs. Coleman? Avery held up her badge. I'm Detective Avery Rios, Tampa Police Department. I need to talk to you about August 17, 1982. Marcia's face didn't change. No shock, no fear. Just a slight tightening around her mouth. As if she'd been expecting this knock for 40 years. I wondered when someone would finally figure it out, Marcia said quietly. She stepped back, opening the door wider. You'd better come in. The house was small, neat, filled with generic furniture and photographs of people who weren't. Family stock images probably. The kind that come in the frames. No pictures of Emily, no memories of a daughter who died at 14. Just a carefully constructed life built on silence and lies. Marcia poured coffee with steady hands, her back to Avery. How much do you know? I know Tom Garrison was murdered. I know his car was in Lake Mirror for 40 years with your daughter's slipper inside. I know Emily survived past 10:03 p.m. and I know you've been lying about everything since that night. Marcia set down the coffee pot. When she turned, her eyes were wet, but her voice remained steady. Then you don't know anything at all, Detective. Not really. You found pieces of the truth, but you haven't found the truth itself, and I'm not sure you want to. Try me. For a long moment, Marcia just stared at her coffee. Then she began to speak, her voice carrying the weight of 4 decades. Daniel wasn't a bad man. Not at first. Smart, ambitious, the kind of person who could make you believe anything was possible. But ambition is a hungry thing, Detective. It eats and eats until there's nothing left but the wanting. She paused. Tom figured out Daniel had been embezzling. Not small amounts. Hundreds of thousands over 2 years. Enough to destroy us, enough to send Daniel to prison for decades. Tom came to dinner that night to give Daniel a choice. Return the money and resign, or face criminal charges. But Daniel chose neither. Daniel chose survival. Marcia's hands trembled around her cup. They argued. Emily was supposed to be asleep, but she heard everything. She came downstairs and her voice cracked. Tom saw her and his expression changed. He realized Emily had heard, that she could testify, that even if Daniel agreed to his terms, there was a witness now. A child who might talk. Avery felt ice in her veins. Tom threatened Emily? Tom grabbed her, said she'd heard too much. Daniel tried to pull him away and they fought. Real fighting, Detective. Tom was bigger, stronger. He had Daniel on the ground choking him, and Emily was screaming. Before we continue, I need you to know something. What you're about to hear has never been told before. Marcia Coleman has lived with this secret for 40 years, and she's choosing now, right now, to speak. If that doesn't make you want to subscribe and share this story, nothing will. Because this is what real investigative journalism looks like. This is why cold cases matter. Hit that subscribe button. Tell someone who needs to hear this. And comment if you're ready for what comes next. Because I promise you it's not what you expect. I picked up the fireplace poker, Marcia continued. Her voice hollow now, distant. I didn't think. I just swung. Caught Tom in the back of the head. He dropped like someone had cut his strings. And there was so much blood, Detective. So much blood pooling on our carpet. And Emily standing there watching me. And Daniel gasping for air. And I realized I just murdered someone. Self-defense, Avery said. You were protecting your husband. Was I? Marcia laughed bitterly. Or was I protecting the life we'd built? The house, the reputation, the money Daniel had stolen? Because in that moment, as Tom lay dying on our floor, the first thought I had wasn't remorse. It was, how do we hide this? And Daniel? Daniel was a planner. Always had been. That's what made him good at embezzling. He could see 3 moves ahead. He looked at Tom's body, looked at Emily and said, we stage an accident. Emily falls down the stairs. Tom panics and runs. That's the story. I said no. Said Emily couldn't be part of it. But Daniel, she swallowed hard. Daniel said Emily had seen everything. that she'd tell eventually, that children can't keep secrets, that we had to make a choice between prison or protecting our family. Avery's stomach turned. He wanted to kill Emily. He said it was already done, that Tom had hurt her when he grabbed her, that she'd hit her head. He said she was barely conscious. He said we could make it look like she fell during the struggle. Make it quick, make it painless. Tears ran down Marcia's face now, and God forgive me, detective, I considered it. For 30 seconds, I stood in my living room with my husband and looked at my daughter and considered letting her die to save ourselves. The silence stretched between them, heavy as the grave. But you didn't, Avery said softly. No, I didn't. I told Daniel we'd find another way. We'd hide Tom's body, say he ran. Emily would lie, say she didn't see anything. We'd coach her, threaten her if necessary, but we wouldn't kill her. Marcia's voice hardened. Daniel agreed, or I thought he did. We wrapped Tom's body, loaded it into his car. Daniel said he'd dump it in the lake while I cleaned the scene. Emily was upstairs in shock but alive. I bandaged her head where she'd hit the banister, gave her sleeping pills, told her everything would be okay if she just stayed quiet. But Daniel had other plans. Marcia nodded. He came back an hour later, said it was done. Tom was in the lake, weighted down, gone forever. We'd stage Emily's fall in the morning, make it look like a tragic accident unrelated to Tom's disappearance. 2 separate incidents. No connection. She looked up, her eyes hollow. I believed him. I actually believed him. I went to bed thinking my daughter was safe, that we'd survived the worst night of our lives. What happened? I woke up at 3 a.m. Emily's bed was empty. Her diary was torn, pages missing, and Daniel was sitting in the kitchen, hands covered in dirt, with that look on his face, that satisfied, problem-solved look. Marcia's voice dropped to a whisper. I asked where Emily was. He said, in the lake, with Tom, where she can't tell anyone what she saw. Then he looked at me and said, you helped kill Tom. You're just as guilty. So you'll keep quiet or you'll join them. The room spun. Avery gripped the table. He murdered Emily after you went to sleep. He staged her fall first. Made it look like 10:03 p.m., called the police, played the grieving father. But Emily was already gone by then. Already in Tom's car. Already sinking into Lake Mirror. Marcia's face crumpled. And I said nothing. For 40 years, I said nothing. Because he was right. I was guilty too. I'd killed Tom. I'd considered killing Emily. I was a monster wearing a mother's face. Avery pulled out the photograph. Then explain this. Emily alive at 10:12 p.m. in Tom's car after you claimed Daniel killed her. Marcia stared at the image. Her face went white. Her hands shook so violently she dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the floor, but neither of them moved. That's impossible, Marcia whispered. She was dead. Daniel said she was dead. He said... She stopped, looked at Avery with sudden, terrible understanding. Unless he lied. Unless Emily was still alive when he took her to the lake. Unless... Marcia stood abruptly, backing away from the table. Oh God, what did he do? The storage unit in Tampa had been rented under a false name for 40 years. Avery discovered it 3 days after returning from North Carolina, buried in property records that should have been purged decades ago. The rental agreement was signed by Thomas Garrison, dated August 18, 1982, 1 day after Tom's murder. But the signature was wrong. The handwriting matched Daniel Pierce's banking documents perfectly. Sam Ortega stood beside her now as the bolt cutter snapped through the rusted lock. You know this could be empty, he said. 40 years is a long time to maintain a storage unit for nothing. Daniel kept paying until he died in 1994, Avery replied, pulling the door open. 12 years of rent on a secret storage unit, that's not nothing. The door screeched open, revealing darkness that smelled of decay and something else. Old paper, chemicals, the scent of preservation. Avery clicked on her flashlight. The beam cut through the shadows, illuminating boxes stacked floor to ceiling, each labeled with dates and cryptic abbreviations. Sam whistled low. This is an archive. Pierce kept records of everything. They pulled the first box into the light. Financial documents from Garrison Holdings, spreadsheets showing the embezzlement in meticulous detail. Daniel hadn't just been stealing, he'd been documenting his own crimes. Why? Insurance? Blackmail against himself? The second box contained newspaper clippings. Every article about Emily's death, about Tom's disappearance, about the investigation. Daniel had circled certain quotes in red ink, made notes in the margins. Detective Webb is getting close. Consider relocation. Marcia is unstable. Monitor her movements. Emily's diary. Destroy remaining pages. But it was the third box that stopped Avery cold. Photographs. Dozens of them. Emily at different ages. Birthday parties, school events, ordinary moments of childhood. But some were different, recent, or relatively recent. Emily at 16, 17, 18. Emily grown into a young woman with honey blonde hair and her mother's sharp eyes. Photographs that couldn't exist, because Emily Pierce died at 14. Sam? Avery's voice shook. Look at the dates. The photos were time-stamped. August 1984, November 1985, March 1987, June 1989. The last one was dated April 1994, 3 months before Daniel Pierce's death. Emily would have been 26 years old in that photograph, and she was alive, standing in front of a small house, holding a baby. Sam's face had gone pale. That's not possible. We found her slipper in the lake. We found her diary page. We found what Daniel wanted us to find. Avery's mind raced, pieces falling into place with horrifying clarity. He faked her death, staged the entire scene, made everyone believe she died that night while he, kept her alive? Hid her? Or she escaped, Sam said quietly. Look at the photos again. The backgrounds. Different houses, different cities. These aren't surveillance photos from someone keeping a prisoner. These are proof of life, Avery finished. Someone was documenting that Emily was alive, tracking her, following her across years and cities. She pulled out her phone and dialed Marcus Webb. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. I need you to tell me something, Avery said without preamble. When Daniel Pierce died in 1994, what was the cause? Silence then. Officially? Heart attack. He was 56, overweight, heavy drinker. Not suspicious. Unofficially? I always thought it was convenient. He died 3 days before I was going to get a warrant to search his property for evidence related to Tom's disappearance. 3 days, detective. That's not coincidence. And if you're thinking what I'm thinking right now, then you understand why these cold cases need attention, why the truth matters even 40 years later. Because Emily Pierce didn't die in 1982, she survived, and someone made sure we'd never find her. Subscribe to this channel if you want justice for the families who've waited decades for answers. Share this with anyone who believes the truth is worth fighting for. Comment below, where do you think Emily is now? Because we're about to find out. Avery and Sam spent the next 6 hours cataloging everything in the storage unit. Bank records showing monthly wire transfers to something called Sanctuary Trust on repayments that continued from 1982 until Daniel's death. Legal documents for a trust fund established in Emily's name, untouchable until her 21st birthday, and a ledger, handwritten, tracking expenses, living arrangements, education, medical care, relocation. Daniel Pierce hadn't killed his daughter. He'd hidden her, built an entirely new life for her while letting the world believe she was dead. But why? The answer was in the last box, sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. Inside was a video cassette labeled simply, "For whoever finds this." The truth about August 17, 1982. Sam found a VCR in the evidence storage room, an actual working VCR, museum piece that it was. They loaded the tape. The screen flickered, then resolved into grainy footage of Daniel Pierce sitting in what looked like a motel room. He was younger, maybe 40, but already carrying the weight of guilt in his eyes. The timestamp read, September 3rd, 1982, 17 days after Emily's supposed death. Daniel's voice crackled through the ancient speakers. My name is Daniel Pierce, and I need to confess something before it destroys what's left of my family. On August 17, 1982, my business partner Tom Garrison was killed in my home. My wife Marcia struck him with a fireplace poker during an altercation. It was self-defense, but we panicked. We decided to hide the body. He paused, running his hands through his hair. But Tom wasn't dead. Not completely. He was unconscious, bleeding, but alive. And my daughter Emily, she saw everything. She wanted to call 911. She tried to save him. She was 14 years old and she was braver than both her parents combined. Avery leaned closer to the screen. Marcia wanted to finish it, said we couldn't let Tom live to testify. I said no, we argued. And Emily, Daniel's voice broke. Emily ran. She grabbed Tom's car keys and ran. She was going to drive to the police station, going to turn us in. She made it to the car before I caught her. The screen flickered. Daniel wiped his eyes. I should have let her go. Should have let her tell the truth, accept the consequences. But I thought about prison, about losing everything, so I made a choice. I told Emily that if she went to the police, I'd tell them she killed Tom, that I'd testify against her, that at 14, she'd go to juvenile detention until she was 18, maybe longer, that her life would be over. Sam swore quietly. Avery couldn't breathe. She didn't believe me at first, but I was convincing. I always was. I told her I'd plant evidence, had already planted evidence. Her fingerprints on the poker. Her diary entries I'd forged showing she hated Tom. I told her she had two choices, prison or disappearance. A new life somewhere far away where no one would ever find her. Where she could be safe. Daniel looked directly at the camera, tears streaming down his face. She chose disappearance. Not because she was guilty, but because I convinced her she was. I staged her death that night, used the medical training I had from college to slow her heartbeat with drugs, make her appear dead long enough for the EMTs to call it. Then I revived her and drove her to a facility I'd arranged. People who specialized in making people vanish. Jesus Christ, Sam whispered. I told myself I was protecting her, that this was better than prison. But the truth is I was protecting myself. I silenced the only witness to Tom's murder, and I made my daughter believe she was guilty of a crime she tried to prevent. Daniel's face crumpled. Tom Garrison died in my garage 3 hours after Marcia hit him. Emily tried to call 911 from Tom's car. There's a phone record I've kept, but I stopped her. If she'd succeeded, Tom might have lived. Instead, I let him die to protect our secret. The tape continued for another minute. Daniel explaining the trust fund, the monthly payments, the new identity he'd created for Emily. Her new name is Sarah Blackwell. She's living in Oregon with a family who believes she's their adopted niece. She doesn't know I'm recording this. She thinks I destroyed all evidence of her past, but I kept it. Call it insurance, call it guilt, call it the desperate act of a man who knows he's damned. The screen went black. Then in the last 5 seconds, Daniel's voice returned. If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. And you should know, Emily tried to come back. In 1989, she tried to return to Tampa, tell the truth. I stopped her, threatened her again, told her Marcia would go to prison, that her mother's blood was equally on her hands. She believed me because I'd spent 7 years making her believe she was guilty. A long pause. I killed my daughter's soul while keeping her body alive. That's the truth. That's my confession. Find her. Tell her it wasn't her fault. Tell her. The tape ended. Avery sat in silence, the weight of 40 years pressing down on her shoulders. Emily Pierce hadn't died. She'd been erased, rebuilt, convinced of a guilt she never earned. And somewhere in America, a 46-year-old woman was living under a false name, carrying the burden of a crime her father had committed. Sam spoke first. We need to find Sarah Blackwell. No, Avery said slowly. We need to find Emily Pierce because that's who she is. That's who she's always been. The woman who answered the phone in Portland, Oregon, had a voice that carried ghosts. "Blackwell residence," she said. And Avery heard 40 years of careful construction in those two words. The practiced neutrality, the deliberate absence of accent, the sound of someone who'd learned to erase themselves. "Is this Sarah Blackwell?" A pause, too long. "Who's asking?" "My name is Detective Avery Rios, Tampa Police Department. I'm calling about a cold case investigation from 1982. The silence that followed was so complete Avery thought the line had disconnected. Then barely a whisper. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Emily, I know what happened. I know what your father did. I know about August 17th, 1982. And I know you've been living with guilt that was never yours to carry." A sharp intake of breath, then, "Don't call this number again." The line went dead. Avery sat in her car outside the Tampa Police Department staring at her phone. 46 years old. Emily would be 46 now. Old enough to have built a complete life on foundations of lies. Old enough to have children who didn't know their mother's real name. Old enough to have buried the terrified 14-year-old girl so deep that resurrection might destroy everything. But the truth demanded resurrection. Sam climbed into the passenger seat carrying a file thick with records. Found her. Sarah Blackwell, born December 1979 according to Oregon State records, which we know is fake. High school diploma from Portland. Bachelor's degree in social work from Reed College. Currently employed as a counselor for at-risk youth. He looked at Avery. "She helps kids who've been through trauma. The irony is..." "Not irony," Avery interrupted. "Penance. She's trying to save the girl she used to be." They had an address. A modest house in a quiet Portland neighborhood where Sarah Blackwell lived alone. No marriage records, no children. Just a woman who'd apparently chosen solitude over the risk of anyone looking too closely at her past. Avery booked a flight for the next morning. But that night, as she reviewed the case files one more time, her phone rang. "Unknown number. Oregon area code," she answered. "Detective Rios, you said you know what happened." Emily's voice was different now, stronger, edged with something that might have been anger, or might have been hope. "But you don't, not all of it. Because there's one piece my father never knew. One piece I never told anyone." "I'm listening." "Tom Garrison wasn't just my father's business partner. He was..." Emily's voice cracked. "He was my biological father." The words hung in the air like a detonation. Avery's mind reeled, every assumption shattering and reforming. "What?" "My mother had an affair with Tom before I was born. Daniel found out when I was 12, saw a medical report. DNA test he'd ordered secretly. He confronted my mother. She admitted it. Begged him not to leave. And Daniel..." Emily laughed bitterly. "Daniel saw opportunity. He used the affair as leverage. Made Tom feel guilty enough to let Daniel embezzle from their company. Tom paid for his own betrayal with stolen money. The embezzlement suddenly made terrible sense. Tom was paying Daniel to keep quiet about the affair for 2 years. But by 1982, Tom couldn't sustain it anymore. The company was failing. Tom's marriage was falling apart from the financial stress. So he decided to come clean about the money, about the affair, about me. He was going to tell his wife, tell the authorities, tell everyone the truth." Emily's breathing was ragged now. "That's why he came to dinner that night. Not just to confront Daniel, to tell me he was my real father, to finally claim me." Before we continue with what Emily reveals next, I need you to understand the weight of what you're hearing. A secret hidden inside a secret, inside a lie that lasted 40 years. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. Because what comes next will explain everything. Why Daniel went to such extremes. Why Marcia stayed silent. Why Emily disappeared. Share this with someone who understands that the truth isn't always simple, that families hide things that should never be hidden. Comment if you're ready for the final pieces to fall into place. "When Tom grabbed me that night," Emily continued, her voice distant now, remembering, "he wasn't threatening me. He was trying to protect me. Daniel had a knife. I didn't see it at first because I was focused on the fighting, but Tom saw. And when Daniel lunged at me, Tom grabbed me, pulled me out of the way. That's when my mother hit him with the poker. She thought Tom was attacking you. She knew exactly what she was doing, Detective. She saved Daniel, not me. Because if Daniel died and the truth came out about the affair, about Tom being my father, about the embezzlement, she'd lose everything. Her husband's reputation, her social standing, her comfortable life built on lies. Emily's voice turned cold. My mother chose preservation over truth, just like she always did. Avery thought of Marcia in North Carolina crying over coffee, playing the victim. She told me she tried to save you, that Daniel wanted you dead but she refused. She's lying. She helped stage my death, Detective. She's the one who gave me the drugs that slowed my heartbeat. She's the one who did my makeup to look like a corpse. She coached me on staying still while the EMTs examined me. Emily paused, and she's the one who told me if I ever came back, if I ever told the truth, she'd say I killed Tom, that a jury would believe a grieving mother over a confused, traumatized teenager. She was more convincing than my father ever was. The pieces were falling into place now. A portrait of a family who'd cannibalized their own daughter to maintain their facade. The photograph, Avery said. The one of you in Tom's car at 10:12 p.m. Who took it? My mother. She drove me to Lake Mirror in Tom's car, told me we were going to hide the vehicle, make it look like Tom ran. I was terrified, drugged, barely conscious. She posed me in the back seat, took that picture with a Polaroid camera. Then Emily's voice broke. She told me to get out of the car, said we were going to sink it with Tom's body inside. But when I climbed out, she grabbed my arm and said, or you could stay in the car. Emily, stay with your real father. Would that be easier? Avery's blood ran cold. She was giving you a choice between disappearing or dying. She drove me to a motel instead. Told me Daniel had arranged a new life for me, that I had to take it or face prison. She handed me an envelope with cash and fake documents, kissed my forehead, and said, you were always Tom's daughter, never mine. This is better for everyone. Emily's breathing was shaky now, 40 years of pain bleeding through. Then she drove away. I was 14 years old, alone in a parking lot with a dead man's blood on my dress and a new name I didn't recognize. And I believed, God help me, I believed it was all my fault. It wasn't, Avery said fiercely. None of it was your fault. I know that now. Took 30 years of therapy to understand it. But knowledge doesn't erase the damage, Detective. I'm 46 years old, and I still can't look at old photos without panicking. I've never had a relationship that lasted more than 6 months, because I can't trust anyone with the truth. I work with traumatized kids because saving them is the only thing that makes me feel like I'm worth anything. She paused. So yes, I know what my parents did. But do you know what I did? What do you mean? I watched my mother kill my biological father. I said nothing while Daniel dumped his body in a lake. I accepted a new identity and let the world believe I was dead. I'm not innocent, Detective. I'm complicit. I helped them get away with murder. You were a child. You were manipulated. I was 14, not 4. Old enough to know right from wrong. Old enough to realize that disappearing meant Tom's murder would never be solved, that his family would never have closure. Emily's voice hardened. I made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong choice, but I made it, and I've lived with it every day since. Avery heard something in Emily's voice that she recognized. The same obsession that drove Marcus Webb. The same hunger for resolution that kept cold case detectives awake at night. You want to come forward. That's why you called me back. I want to know if it's too late. If 40 years of silence makes me guilty of obstruction. If coming forward now means prison. Emily laughed without humor. Ironic, isn't it? My father threatened me with prison to keep me quiet. And now the truth might send me there anyway. Emily, listen to me. You were a minor. You were under duress. Any prosecutor would... I'm not looking for legal advice, Detective. I'm asking if you can promise me that telling the truth will matter, that it will mean something beyond destroying what's left of my life. A long pause. Because if I come forward, I lose everything. My job, my name, my privacy. Everyone I know will discover I'm a lie. So I need to know. Will Tom Garrison finally get justice? Will my parents face consequences, even posthumously? Or will this just be another true crime story that entertains people for a week before they forget? The question struck Avery like a physical blow, because she couldn't promise any of that. Daniel was dead. Marcia was elderly, possibly beyond prosecution. Tom's murder would be solved, but his killer was already in the grave. Justice, in the traditional sense, was impossible. But truth wasn't. I can promise you this, Avery said slowly. Tom Garrison's family will finally know he didn't abandon them, that he died trying to protect his daughter, and you. You'll finally be free of the lie you've been living. That has to count for something. Foylance, then. When can you be in Portland? Tomorrow morning. Then I'll tell you everything. The whole truth, no matter what it costs me. Emily's voice softened, became almost childlike. I'm tired, Detective. I've been running for 40 years and I'm just so tired. The coffee shop in Portland smelled like rain and regret. Avery sat in the back corner watching the door, her recorder hidden in her jacket pocket. Beside her, Sam nursed an espresso, his eyes scanning every face that entered. They'd been waiting 20 minutes when a woman walked in, medium height, honey blonde hair now threaded with gray, wearing jeans and a coat that had seen better years. She looked ordinary, forgettable exactly, like someone who'd spent 40 years trying not to be noticed. Their eyes met. Emily Pierce, Sarah Blackwell, whoever she was now, stopped just inside the door. For a moment, Avery thought she might bolt, but then Emily's shoulders dropped, as if she'd been holding them rigid for decades, and she walked toward their table with the careful steps of someone approaching. The edge of a cliff. Detective Rios. Emily's voice was quieter in person, almost fragile. She didn't offer her hand, didn't sit immediately, just stood there, studying Avery's face as if searching for judgment. Emily, Avery said gently, thank you for meeting us. This is my partner, Detective Ortega. Sam is fine. He pushed out a chair. We're not here to arrest you. We're here to listen. Emily finally sat, wrapping her hands around the coffee cup Sam had ordered for her. I haven't told this story in order. Never told anyone the complete truth. I'm not sure where to start. Start with the moment you realized you couldn't go home, Avery suggested. Emily nodded slowly, her eyes distant. The motel. August 18th, 1982, around 3 in the morning. My mother had just left me there with an envelope full of cash and documents saying I was Sarah Blackwell, adopted niece of a family in Oregon I'd never met. I sat on that bed for hours, staring at my reflection in the mirror, trying to recognize myself. There was blood under my fingernails. Tom's blood from when I'd tried to help him. And I kept thinking, if I go to the police now, they'll see the blood and think I killed him. But you didn't kill him, Sam said. No, but I watched him die. Emily's voice cracked. He was still breathing when my mother hit him. Still conscious. He looked at me and he tried to say something. I think he was trying to say I'm sorry or I love you or maybe run. But my father, Daniel, he put his hand over Tom's mouth. Told me to go upstairs, and like a coward I did. She took a shaky breath. 20 minutes later, I came back down. Tom wasn't breathing anymore, and my parents were arguing about what to do with the body. That's when Daniel saw me and his face. She shuddered. His face went cold, calculating. He said, Emily, you understand you can't tell anyone about this, right? If you do, they'll blame you. You're the one who invited Tom to dinner. You're the one who was alone with him first. Your fingerprints are all over that poker. He was lying, Avery said, building a narrative to control you. I know that now. But at 14, terrified, watching my parents wrap my biological father's body in plastic, I believed every word. So when Daniel said I had two choices, prison or a new life, I chose survival, just like they did. The coffee shop was filling with morning customers now. Ordinary people getting their ordinary coffee, living ordinary lives that didn't include murder and deception. Avery envied them. If you're still watching this, still following Emily's story, then you understand this isn't entertainment. This is a woman's life. 40 years of psychological imprisonment that's finally ending. Subscribe if you believe survivors deserve to be heard. Share this with someone who needs to know that speaking truth, no matter how late, matters. Comment below if you've ever kept a secret that nearly destroyed you. Because Emily's story is for you too. The family in Oregon, Emily continued, they weren't part of any conspiracy. They genuinely believed they were helping a distant relative who'd been orphaned. Daniel had created an entire backstory. My parents died in a car accident. I was traumatized. I needed a fresh start. They were kind people who asked too few questions. And she swallowed hard. I became Sarah, went to school, made friends who didn't know they were befriending a ghost, went to college, built a career, all while knowing that somewhere in Tampa, Tom Garrison's family was wondering why he'd abandoned them. Did you ever try to contact Tom's family? Sam asked. Once in 1995, right after Daniel died. I thought maybe with him gone I could tell the truth. I found Tom's widow's address, wrote a letter explaining everything. But before I could mail it, I got a call from my mother. Emily's face hardened. She'd been monitoring me somehow. Knew about the letter. She said if I sent it, she'd tell authorities I'd been blackmailing Daniel for years, that she had evidence, fabricated evidence proving I'd orchestrated Tom's murder to inherit money from his estate. She said no one would believe a girl who'd been living under a false identity for 13 years. She was still controlling you, Avery said, anger building in her chest. Even after Daniel's death, she controlled me until 5 years ago. That's when I finally hired a lawyer, explained everything confidentially. He helped me understand that most of what my parents told me was legally false. I couldn't be charged with Tom's murder. I was a minor, under duress, and I didn't commit the act. The worst I could face was obstruction charges with significant mitigating circumstances. Emily looked directly at Avery. But knowing you're legally innocent and believing you're morally innocent are different things. I've spent 40 years wondering if I could have saved Tom. If I'd been braver, smarter, stronger. Stop, Avery interrupted firmly. You were a child in an impossible situation. Tom died because your mother killed him and your father let him die, not because you weren't brave enough. Tears ran down Emily's face now, the first real emotion breaking through the careful control. Then why does it still feel like my fault? Because that's what trauma does, Sam said quietly. It convinces victims they're perpetrators. It's how abusers maintain power long after the abuse ends. Emily wiped her eyes, took a steadying breath. There's more. Things I found out later, after Daniel died. He left documents, a kind of insurance policy, I think. Records of everything. That's probably how you found me. We found his storage unit, Avery confirmed. The photographs, the financial records, the video confession. Then you know he documented my entire life. Every city I lived in, every job I held, every relationship I attempted. He was obsessed with monitoring me, making sure I stayed disappeared. Emily's voice turned bitter. After he died, I had his lawyer send me everything. There were journals, detective. Volumes of them. And in those journals, Daniel wrote about his guilt, about how destroying my life destroyed his, about how he drank himself to death because he couldn't live with what he'd done. Good, Sam muttered. No, not good. Because in those journals, he also wrote about my mother, about arguments they had, and in one entry dated March 1989, he wrote something that changed everything. I thought I knew, Emily pulled a folded paper from her pocket. I brought a copy. You need to read it. Avery took the paper. The handwriting was shaky. The ink smeared in places as if Daniel had been crying while he wrote. Marcia confessed something tonight that makes me question everything. She says Tom wasn't trying to tell me about the embezzlement that night. He was trying to tell me that Marcia had been poisoning me, slowly, for months using something untraceable. That Tom had found medical records, noticed my symptoms matched arsenic poisoning. That he came to dinner to confront her, not me. But I don't believe it. I can't believe it. Because if Marcia was trying to kill me, then Emily running wasn't about protecting me from prison. It was about escaping her mother. And I sent her away believing she was guilty. God forgive me, what have I done? The coffee shop seemed to tilt. Avery read the entry 3 times, each time the words hitting harder. Is this true? She asked. Was your mother poisoning Daniel? I had Daniel's medical records, analyzed by a toxicologist in 2020. He died of what they called a heart attack in 1994, but his symptoms leading up to death, chronic fatigue, confusion, organ failure, they're consistent with long-term arsenic exposure. Emily's face was pale. My mother was killing him, slowly. Maybe because she wanted to be free of him. Maybe because she was afraid he'd eventually confess. But Tom figured it out. And when he came to dinner that night to save Daniel's life, my mother killed him instead. Jesus, Sam breathed. There's more, Emily said. The slipper you found in the lake, the one wrapped around my diary page? I didn't put that there. I was wearing both slippers when my mother drove me to the motel, which means someone went back to Lake Mirror later, planted that evidence to make sure my death looked real. Your mother, Avery said. My mother. She staged everything, the fall, the crime scene, even the evidence that would be found decades later. She was always 3 steps ahead, always planning. Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. And she's still alive, still free, still winning. Avery leaned forward. Not anymore. Because you're about to take away the only thing she has left. Her lie. When we expose the truth, Marcia Coleman will face the world knowing her daughter survived, knowing her crimes are finally visible. That's a different kind of justice. Emily met her eyes. Then let's burn it all down. Every lie, every secret. I'm ready to be Emily Pierce again, even if it destroys me. Outside, rain began to fall on Portland's streets, washing away 40 years of carefully constructed deception, one drop at a time. The press conference was scheduled for November 15, 2024, 42 years and 3 months after Emily Pierce was declared dead. Avery stood backstage at the Tampa Police Department headquarters, watching Emily pace. The woman who'd lived as Sarah Blackwell for 4 decades was about to reclaim her real name in front of cameras, reporters, and a world that had forgotten she existed. She'd cut her hair shorter, stopped dyeing the gray, and wore a simple blue dress that made her look somehow younger and older simultaneously. You don't have to do this, Avery said quietly. We have enough evidence to close the case without you facing the public. Emily shook her head. Yes, I do. Because somewhere out there, there's a 14-year-old girl in an impossible situation, being told by adults she trusts that she's guilty of something she didn't do. She needs to see that survival is possible. That speaking truth, even decades late, still matters. Still, Marcus Webb appeared in the doorway, his weathered face showing something Avery had never seen before. Peace. In his hands, he carried a worn folder. I thought you might want this, he said to Emily, offering it to her. Emily opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, not the surveillance images Daniel had taken, but real family photos from before 1982. Emily as a toddler. Emily on her first day of school. Emily at a piano recital, her face glowing with joy that hadn't yet learned to hide. Tom's widow gave these to me in 1983, Webb explained. She said Tom carried photos of you in his wallet, even though officially you weren't his daughter. She asked me to find you, to make sure you were okay. I failed her then, but not today. Emily's hands trembled as she touched the photographs. She knew? Tom's wife knew about me, she suspected. And she loved you anyway because Tom loved you. She died in 2003, but before she passed, she told her son everything. Tom's son, your half-brother, is here today. He wanted to meet you, if you're ready. Before we reach the end of Emily's story, I need you to understand something. This isn't a tragedy. Yes, terrible things happened. Yes, lives were shattered and decades were stolen. But Emily survived. She reclaimed herself, and that's worth celebrating. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the secrets families keep and the courage it takes to speak truth, then subscribe. Share this with someone who needs hope. Comment below and tell Emily, because yes, she'll read these, that her story mattered, that she mattered. That 40 years of silence ending is worth everything. The man waiting in the hallway was 62 years, old with his father's kind eyes and Emily's exact shade of honey blonde hair. Thomas Garrison Jr. stood when Emily emerged, and for a long moment, they just stared at each other, siblings who'd never met, connected by a father neither had really known. "I have his watch," Thomas said quietly, pulling a gold wristwatch from his pocket. "The one they found in the lake. Police returned it last month. I thought if you wanted—" He couldn't finish. Emily crossed the space between them and took his hand. The watch pressed between their palms. "He tried to save me," she whispered. "Your father died trying to protect me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't save him." "You were 14 years old," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "You survived." That's what he would have wanted. That's all he would have wanted, he paused. "I have a daughter. She's 13. When this story broke and I learned about you, I realized if anything like this happened to her, I'd want her to survive any way she could. My father would feel the same way about you." They stood together in that hallway, two people shaped by the same tragedy, finally finding something like family in the wreckage. The press conference began at 2 p.m. Chief of Police Maria Santos spoke first, outlining the case, the evidence, the resolution. Then Detective Rios took the podium, explaining how DNA technology and persistent investigation had cracked open 40 years of lies. She detailed Marcia Pierce's role, not just in Tom's death, but in Emily's erasure, in the systematic poisoning of Daniel Pierce, in the construction of a false narrative that had protected her for decades. Marcia Pierce Coleman will face charges of second-degree murder, obstruction of justice, child endangerment, and conspiracy, Avery announced. She's currently in custody in North Carolina, awaiting extradition to Florida. The reporters erupted with questions, but Avery held up her hand. "There's someone else who needs to speak, someone whose voice was silenced for 42 years. Emily Pierce." Emily walked to the podium. Camera flashes exploded like small stars. She gripped the edges of the lectern, took a breath, and began. "My name is Emily Pierce. I was born in Tampa, Florida in 1968. I was declared dead in 1982. But I survived. And I need you to understand something. I didn't survive because I was strong or brave. I survived because I was terrified and obedient and convinced that my existence was a crime. For 40 years I believed I was guilty, that I deserved to hide, that speaking truth would only cause more harm." Her voice grew stronger. "But I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect anyone. It only protects the people who benefit from lies. My mother killed my biological father. She poisoned my legal father. She erased me from existence and convinced me it was mercy. And she got away with it for 40 years because I was too afraid to speak." Emily looked directly at the cameras. "If you're watching this and you're carrying a secret someone told you to keep, a secret about abuse or violence or crimes committed against you, please hear me. It's not too late. It's never too late to speak truth. You are not guilty for surviving. You are not guilty for staying silent when you had no choice. But when you find your voice, use it. Because the world needs to hear what happened to you." She paused, tears streaming down her face now. "Tom Garrison was my father. He died trying to protect me. For 40 years his family thought he'd abandoned them. Now they know the truth. That's worth everything I lost. That's worth 40 years of hiding. Because finally, he gets to be remembered as the man he actually was. A father who loved his daughter enough to die for her." Emily stepped back from the podium and the room erupted. Questions shouted from every direction. But Emily wasn't listening anymore. She walked straight to Thomas Garrison Jr., and he pulled her into an embrace that looked like coming home. 3 months later, Avery received a letter postmarked from Portland. Inside was a photograph. Emily standing in front of a small house with a fresh coat of paint, holding a sign that read, "Emily Pierce, LCSW, Trauma Counseling." Below the photo, a note in careful handwriting. "Dear Detective Rios, I changed my business cards. Turns out 46 years old is exactly the right time to finally become yourself. The kids I work with ask about my story sometimes. I tell them the truth now, all of it. That I was erased and convinced it was my fault, but that I survived anyway. That speaking truth is terrifying and necessary and the only way forward. Thank you for giving me back my name. Thank you for making Tom's death mean something. And thank you for proving that some truths refuse to stay buried, no matter how deep you dig the grave. With gratitude and peace, I never thought I'd find Emily Pierce.
Avery pinned the letter to her bulletin board, right beside the photograph of 14-year-old Emily from 1982, the last photo taken before she disappeared. Two versions of the same person, 40 years apart, finally reconciled into one truth.
Marcus Webb retired the following month. At his retirement party, someone asked if he had any regrets about his career. He looked at Emily's press conference photo, smiled for the first time in years, and said, "Not anymore." Marcia Pierce Coleman was convicted on all charges in 2025. She maintained her innocence throughout the trial, insisting she'd been manipulated by Daniel, that Emily had misremembered, that the evidence was circumstantial. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. She was sentenced to 25 years to life. She'll die in prison, her carefully constructed facade finally shattered. And Emily? Emily Pierce reclaimed every piece of herself the world had tried to erase. She testified at her mother's trial with steady voice and clear eyes. She scattered Tom Garrison's ashes in Tampa Bay with her half-brother. She framed the watch, the one that had survived 40 years underwater, and hung it in her office as a reminder that some things refuse to corrode, no matter how long they're submerged in darkness. On August 17, 2025, 43 years to the day after the night that split her family, Emily stood at the rebuilt Lake Mirror Marina. Someone had erected a small memorial plaque. In memory of Thomas Garrison, 1944-1982, a father who loved fiercely and died protecting what mattered most. Emily placed flowers at its base, and as the Florida sun set over the water, turning the lake into liquid gold, she whispered the words she'd carried for 4 decades. "I made it, Dad. I finally made it home." Some truths take 40 years to surface. Some families bury more than they're dead. But justice, like water, finds its way through every crack, every lie, every carefully constructed wall of silence, and in the end, the truth always surfaces. Always.